It's an old story. It's as old as our history. The difference between Democrats and Republicans has always been measured in courage and confidence. The Republicans believe that the wagon train will not make it to the frontier unless some of the old, some of the young, some of the weak are left behind by the side of the trail. The strong, they tell us, will inherit the land. We Democrats believe in something else. We Democrats believe that we can make it all the way with the whole family intact, and we have more than once.
Prior to the 1820s, most states had a requirement of property ownership for voters. Through the actions of Andrew Jackson and his Democratic Party, suffrage was expanded to all white men, regardless of land ownership. As a result, Jackson and the Democrats won the nasty 1828 election, in which he depicted President John Quincy Adams as a gambling intellectual monarchist, while Jackson's opponents portrayed him as a slave-trading, dueling, drunken ruffian with an adulterous wife. Jackson's party was founded on the principles of white male suffrage, a strict constructionist view of the Constitution, internal improvements, and an opposition to a national bank. Democrats were popular throughout much of the populace, leading many local and state political leaders to join the party. The only area where Democrats lacked support was New England. The party won 6 of the first 8 elections Democrats were represented in, which included the Presidents Andrew Jackson, Martin Van Buren, James Polk, Franklin Pierce, and James Buchanan. When Franklin Pierce signed the Kansas-Nebraska Act into law in 1854, the reaction was catastrophic. The act stated that new territory residents would decide the slavery issue when they became states through the popular sovereignty policy. Northerners were angry about this, and in 1854, dissenting Democrats, former members of the Whig Party, and members of the Free Soil Party came together to form the anti-slavery Republican Party. The party gained enough support to receive the second highest amount of votes as any other party in the election of 1856, and although losing the election to the Democratic candidate James Buchanan, began planning for the election of 1860. During the next 4 years of growing separation between the North and South, Abraham Lincoln emerged as a Republican leader, gaining distinction in the 1858 election for the Illinois Senate seat. He faced off in the famous debates with his opponent Stephen Douglas, which made both men national celebrities. Lincoln said about America that a house divided against itself cannot stand. Lincoln lost that race, but became the Republican candidate for president in the election of 1860 against the divided Democratic Party, split into a northern faction for Stephen Douglas and a southern faction for John C. Breckinridge. The result was a victory for Abraham Lincoln and the Republicans. It was no comfort to Congress that Andrew Johnson became Lincoln's successor. He was a Southerner who believed slaves had a right to be free, but not necessarily full rights as citizens. He also pardoned many ex-Confederates. The radical Republicans in Congress wanted freedmen to have full citizenship rights and fought hard against Johnson for no leniency to the Confederates. Their legislation led to the Freedmen's Bureau, the Civil Rights Law of 1866, which Congress overrode over Johnson's veto. The Reconstruction Act, which divided the South into 5 military districts policed by Union Army troops, and the 14th Amendment. Radicals became so angry at Johnson's opposition to their plans that they attempted to impeach him from office, but were unsuccessful. By 1868, when Ulysses S. Grant was elected president, the Republicans were able to keep the White House for almost 2 decades. The most important administration was Rutherford B. Hayes, the result of a contested race in 1876 that was resolved through a compromise which pleased Republicans by making Hayes president and satisfied Southern Democrats by pulling the occupation out of the Southern states, effectively ending the Northern Reconstruction of the South. One result of Reconstruction was that the South associated the Republican Party with civil rights and the Democratic Party with states' rights. Southern states became so devoted to the Democratic Party for the next century that it was known as the Solid South. William McKinley was assassinated in September of 1901. His successor was his young vice president, Theodore Roosevelt, who set the precedent as a more activist leader. Popular president, Roosevelt was a progressive Republican who saw his party as the strongest in America, one that had the ability to help everyone, while the Democratic Party was built on incompetence and states' rights. While a conservative on issues of traditional and moral values, including a strong belief in social Darwinism, he also believed in the necessity of some government regulation of big business, especially the railroads, the meatpacking industry, and the financial markets. He also believed in preserving the environment and is now recognized as the first conservationist president. Roosevelt left the White House one of the most popular presidents of all time. His successor was William Howard Taft, a more conservative politician who believed in a strict interpretation of the Constitution. Republicans were not the only members of the progressive movement. Democrats were also part, the most prominent being populist William Jennings Bryan. Bryan ran for president on the Democratic Party ticket in 3 elections and lost all of them. His populist beliefs included wanting the currency to switch from the gold standard to silver, election reform, abolition of child labor, railroad regulation, new food and drug acts, and morality. Although Bryan lost the presidency, his impact on politics in the early 20th century paved the way for future presidential candidates, both Democrat and Republican. Roosevelt, angry at the direction the Republican Party was heading under Taft, came out of retirement to campaign for president in 1912. After losing the nomination, he was determined to go forward anyway, so he created his own party, the Progressives, or as it became known, the Bull Moose Party. Roosevelt approached the campaign with almost a religious zeal. Nothing would stop him, not even when he was shot before making a speech. Instead of getting medical care, Roosevelt was unrelenting, presenting his speech anyway, holding up his blood-stained shirt proudly to the crowd and screaming, "It takes more than that to kill a bull moose." The winner of the election was neither Roosevelt nor Taft, but Democratic challenger Woodrow Wilson. Wilson was the governor of New Jersey, who was elected as a conservative Democrat, but became a progressive with an agenda of reform which included antitrust legislation, government regulation of railroads and utilities, and workmen's compensation. While his move towards progressivism lost him the support of the conservatives, he won the election because of the split in the Republican Party and his progressive New Freedom platform. His platform would reduce the tariff, set up the Federal Reserve System to create a national bank, regulate the free market, and break up excessive power. Several parts of the New Freedom platform would not be fully implemented until after World War II.